Now the question is, there is a competition going on. If I have 40 radio channels, I'm not doing a philanthropy. I'm not doing a philanthropy. I'm not doing a philanthropy for which I have taken 40 radio stations. I want to make market. I want to make market through radio. Because I have huge line of products and I want to sell them through my radio. And that is where the radio will be used for the listener surveys. And I want to move the listener more towards my radio. In fact, very interesting if you recall that during Second World War, you know that Germany used to be very good in terms of radio, as I said earlier, that if photography is for British colonialism, radio for Nazi Germany, and television for American imperialism. I was saying that if Germans were very good in radio during Second World War, the band of jazz music. When they banned jazz music, everybody, because jazz was played by the blacks, listened by the Jews, and suddenly you find, so they realized that they must ban jazz music in Germany. And you find that the listeners, radio listeners, glued to Radio Benelux and Belgium rather than listening to German radio. So what I'm saying is that you lose your listeners. You lose your listeners. And that is how you find that there was an aggressive marketing of radio, what you call the soap operas. Soap opera actually started with radio. Then subsequently it moved to television, because these are 90 minutes, American plans of soap operas are 90 minutes. What we have is a Mexican format of R&R. Now, these 90 minutes were, also think about 1930s and 40s, average American women were confined to their household. So it is they who were the decision maker of the household, or what you call they were the managers of the households. They used to decide what ration, what ambience of your drawing room, what kind of stuff to be procured, purchased from the market. So this is how constantly it is they who have to be fed about all these informations. Along with that, you want to attract to your radio. And this is the context. Leicester, HMS Leicester, is moving from Austria, because prior to that, they didn't have anybody to do quantitative surveys. Leicester, moving from Austria, going to Columbia, being a part of Applied Social Research Bureau, and sort of trying to do surveys. So what you study in sociology and social sciences, most of the techniques, that's called the techniques, like survey, interview, when you talk about sociometry, you talk about psychometry. This is what you need to present the data in different formats. And that is what Leicester did for all these radio stations. In fact, he aggressively promoted, in fact, if you read an excellent book, I think we studied in a master's level, it's called Language of Social Research. Language of Social Research is a book. And there's an interesting article in that. It's called The American Soldier. And I still remember very vividly, and The American Soldier. These are the early writings which came up, the languages. You find in different ways of measurement. There is an aggressive promotion of measurement techniques. How do you quantify? How do you operationalize? This is where, as if you will control the whole universe and the world. This is the idea which came up. I think this is the context when, in 50s, we find that almost there is an exhaustion of our knowledge, and this is what we talk about whenever we talk about empiricism, that how empirically we can verify. Now, what I would like to submit, there is a massive criticisms which went on post-50s probably, that look, whenever we talk about the distinctions between theory and fact, we always talk about empiricism is basically part of the fact. Now we are basically talking about that there is a balance, there should be a balance between it. But over a period of time, your facts dominated your theories. Now this is what subsequently, if you take it further, you find that scholars like Robert Merton and others are trying to be too critical about negating the whole traditions in the philosophy. So philosophy is gradually getting believed, and it is empiricism which is taking ground. And that is how it happened because of American pragmatism. Because as I said, after the Second World War, if anything championed the world, it is American pragmatism. So pragmatism in social sciences today. So we thought about any positivism, any empiricism. So now the question is all about pragmatism. Now, in this context of pragmatism, what you find is this: how it should be utilized, what is the output, and what is the kind of how I present my data. So the question is that in the name of science, actually it is scientism which occurs. So it is not scientific, rather it is scientistic. I would say it is not scientific anymore, it is scientistic. So we call it scientism, science for the sake of science, science for the sake of science. I think that is how positivism landed up in the name of doing empiricism and survey. We just did probably science for the sake of science. I think there was a much critique about it. What even Abhijit very interestingly talked about, that the moment I see the, like, who owns the newspaper, that will give me an idea about the nature of the newspaper. But I would also like to say that there were so many questions which remained unanswered. Probably this blind faith in control probably did not allow us to see the inner hidden stories and hidden meanings. And that is where we see that, for instance, we can take about, whenever we talk about comics, I agree that what Anna Matla talked about, how to read Donald Duck. You know that Donald Duck is an alien construction, manufactured, produced in America, presented to Latin America, and now a little kids in their sense of state of unconscious or semi-conscious level, we are all behaving like Donald Duck and bringing out our revolver, bang, 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 shoot, so all the kids, we feel very happy, like, look, our child has rose to the occasion now, behaving like a Donald Duck. So there is one crude analogy of interpretation by saying the producer of the text and the consumer of the text, the producer of the text and the consumer of the text, the purpose is fulfilled because it has been consumed. Right? The production of text and the consumption of text. So the purpose of consumption. मैंने क्यों इसको लिखा? जब अगर आप नहीं खरीदेंगे नहीं पढ़ेंगे. Very simple. चाहे जो भी अड़चन लिखे, कि कोई क्या फर्क पड़ता है? At least पहुंच तो गया. प्रोड्यूसर जब वो कहेगा कि माल सेल हुआ या नहीं, तो लिखना है. But I would like to say, there are humanist elements inside. Like when I see Dennis and the Menace, you see those Dennis and Menace, the little kid interacting with mother. Dennis Menace says that when I open my socks, after whole days tied up, when I open my socks seems to say me thank you. Sorry?
Thank you for wearing it.
Opening it, I'm so exhausted, tired. I live in an environment where since morning I'm wearing socks and shoes and formally cleaned up, decked up, so I need to get out of all these, I need to relax. Right? in a middle class environment, Dennis wants to have a feel of snow. So there is a snowfall outside. It's a middle class environment. So he tells his mother that, can I go out? Can I play with snow? So the mother says, no, it's cold outside. So then he says, can I feel it? He says, can I feel it? He says, no, you can't go out. So what I'm saying is the notion of the snow and the experience of snow itself is completely different. So you find these are humanistic. What I'm trying to say is these are humanistic which cannot be captured by mere codifications. These are humanistic that cannot be captured as. What I'm saying is there are multiple interpretations and meanings. There are multiple interpretations and meanings. So it cannot be captured within a scientific frame of what we call in terms of looking at a logical positivism. The way we try to come out with operationalization, that is, I'm saying, an infinite. There is no end to it. How you define? We just talk about that. Probably one of the reasons why such logical positivism was required is trying to develop a causal analysis. Because you know that all causal explanations were used for theory building exercise. Now whenever you talk about theory building exercise, then you need to have a causal explanation. That is the cause-effect analysis. Because cause-effect is the simplest way for a theory building. But not all explanations are necessarily theory building exercise. But not all explanations are necessarily theory building exercise. We are not all jumping to make a theory overnight. Theory building is a long testing time. But these are different forms of explanations. How you engage with explanations, we are trying to classify. So this is what I'm sort of trying to engage. When I'm talking about empiricism, we know that there are a lot of tremendous positives with the idea of empiricism now. But empiricism helps in a big way. In fact, in communications, you find the whole world was polarized. If you look back to 1980s, there is a tremendous conflict between, on the one hand, what called the administrative researchers. You do research for legitimacy of the administration, order. So the question is, why you are doing such research? So is it for legitimation or for critical self-reflection? That was the idea. That the world was polarized, on the one hand about administrative research, and the other one was branded as critical research. So you find that all them, so that is what, whenever you say about mainstream research, is actually referring to administrative research. And this is where, because any administration for that matter, whether it is a government or an organization, they all require benchmark exercise. They want benchmark information. And this is where you find that for the benchmark information, you need to have a benchmark data for. And that is where you are engaged in doing benchmark analysis. And that is where all administrative research is all about. So this is where the world was polarized. So the whole debate in 50s came up that, look, these are all administrative researchers, and all those who Robert Merton talks about. So these terms are actually coined. If you read Robert K. Merton, you find in social theory and social structure. On the one hand, you have administrative researcher, but I think we need to move beyond such kind of classifications. I think that rather than making administrative and critical, because critical was basically assigned to all the Frankfurt School. But today, that sense of criticality has transcended much beyond. It is not Frankfurt School. Even there was no taker of Frankfurt School within Europe itself. Because their argument was very limited. And no doubt about the contributed immensely to understand culture industry or media. So in fact, one major contributions is about culture industry. However, we find that there was no data within Europe itself about Frankfurt School. In fact, we find that within Europe itself, by the time they are sort of trying to look at a critique of culture, that has been defined within Europe itself, that culture has a symbolic potential. So whether it is in France or in England, we find there is a distance, there is a deliberate distance from a Frankfurt engagement with culture. We find that if you look at, so let's not just confine here. I remember as a student, they all romanticize about culture industry or dialectics of enlightenment. But subsequently we find that there is no discussion, no reference in the entire British Marxism about Frankfurt School, or not even engagement with the Frankfurt School at all. Why Frankfurt School is not even engaged with in the British Marxism? It simply means that they have not given due importance to Frankfurt School at all, even though it had a very valid point. Why is it that in third world, like India, that we have so much obsessively engaged with Frankfurt schools? I mean, this is where we need to understand how the concepts are imported and how the concepts are exported across the world. Who are the agencies exporting and importing these concepts? In fact, India, forget about communications, even in general, has never exported, rather imported concepts and ideas. So all our entire life struggle is to legitimize a concept in Indian context. We have always legitimized concepts. We have always legitimized concepts. As if concept is something which is physically verifiable. So we say, hey, new media. Or any. So you see as if like a trial and error. And these concepts are developed over ages, over the years. And that is what I would like to summarize by saying that you need to be very careful when we are dealing with method explanations. We need to critically engage with the concepts rather than desperately legitimizing. I like one idea because when you find that a lot of students, because I have always dealt with students, education and other things, everybody feels very happy in saying mine is very new. Everybody says mine is very new. There is no work. Mine is very new. Nobody has done it. Mine is new. I say sometimes that ignorance is bliss. Because your lack of exposure to the literature, you don't know your surroundings. So, but everybody says, no, nobody knows mine is very new. Everybody is inventing something. Inventing something all the time. See? But what I'm saying is this is where you find that how this whole idea of empiricism, you find empiricism, we have left behind empiricism. But in India, if you look at, especially if you talk about communication studies at all, we are still not clear. Still we are doing, because all our questions, research questions which we have, is basically to verify. We still live in a very, very mundane, nascent state of our formulating questions. I'm saying that across humanities, social sciences and communication studies, we have not yet come to a creative synergy of raising or developing, and so that there are bits and pieces. Somebody is sort of trying to do on ideology, somebody is doing on political economy, somebody is doing on ethnography. So there are not taker, because there is no proper institution to bring them all under one umbrella to discuss about methodological issues and challenges, or conceptual issues. Maybe like coming December, not this December, coming December we will have the first ICMA meet in Bhubaneswar, and we will do it on All India Communication Media. Because we never brought under one platform where we can actually nurture discussions. Because here what discussions are all either about journalistic reporting, how to do better reporting, and how can you do better. It's not about communication research. Even a journalism itself is not growing except reporting. Even the strands in reporting, how it has changed. So the question is, neither journalism studies could emerge, nor communication studies could emerge. Only social science which had contributed immensely. Only social science which has contributed immensely. Even political science is very unfortunate. Now India, for instance, policymakers. Now India, every other month there is an election. Election has become a big festivity and tourism in India. This is a big bumper. In fact, it's a big bumper. I mean, every other month you find election is becoming a tremendous energy which has been invested in the elections. Whether you move by jet planes or anything, it's a lot of things happening. And so much data is being generated in social media. But still we are struggling use of social media. And how use of social media with newspaper. Very, very pedantic, very rudimentary. We do not understand that so much data is already generated. I mean, if you go to social media, you find that you can analyze those data. In fact, the kind of rhetorics which is happening. I mean, in what way the political rhetorics are coming up? What are the transformations in the rhetorics itself? 60 years down the line, if you want to recall political rhetoric, there's a massive shift. In what way it impinges upon democracy? I mean, you can always look at. I mean, political rhetorics are very important. That we never try to study. But we want to study more about the medium. Use of social media, use of this. I think we are still struggling with this idea. We need to understand that we need to move away from the medium-centric dialogue. Rather, issues are important, and that is where we find that most of our conversations are very basic in terms of confining to the medium. Questions are missing. What you want to address is missing, rather than just in the vicinity, periphery of the media. Because it is media determinism, it's a very, very media centrism, which is actually dominating our entire discourse. So we do not have much understanding about what we call empiricism. Still you find that people normally ask about media impact and media effect. Not the media impact का काम कर रहा हूँ, media effect का काम कर रहा हूँ. So they all fall under this empiricism. You need to understand. You are all studying media impact. You are measuring. Whether we were talking about media impact and effect, you are actually making a measurement. You are trying to measure that in what way you can study the impact. But the most interesting part is, whenever we try to study impact is a very generic. And impact, you need to operationalize how you measure impact. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, you would like to see in what way it has an impact. Then you would like to study on the audience. But those variables, there is a dependent variable, there are independent variables. Then you would like to make a comparison, and then you think that impact can only be defined by those variables, and that is a fixed set of variables in your mind. There is nothing beyond. So that is where you limit the finite sense of your variables. That is a critique of empiricism or even effect studies. But on the contrary, moving away from studying the critique of such reductionism, I think we move more and more towards breaking further within effect. We say that, look, limited limits. Like in fact, one of the Columbia's major critique of Chicago was by saying that they did not study. They thought that it was all socialization, culture, language, sharing. They do not realize that media has a limited. Because after the Second World War, by measuring they realize that not everyone is equal. So this is where the idea of your hypodermic theory comes up. That's all limited effect thesis that's coming up during the section. I mean, this is where from second World War to second World War, they are trying to bring out that, look, this has a limited effect thesis. Media has a limited effect, because this is also a time, a lot of interesting studies are coming up. The post-Cold War, what even Prof talks about, media sociology, the dominant paradigm, where he talks about that in a post-Cold War period when communications you study is actually a time that you cannot make any direct entry into any part of the world. It's a post-Cold War framework of communication. So what we studied prior to that is a pre-Cold War framework. It's like might is right, so bullet theory. So communication, any old students of mass communication have studied. Media is just like a bullet. The way bullet hits you, so media will hit you like a bullet. In fact, there are very interesting, I have been always studying it in my classroom. And, you know, prior to the Second World War, after America bombarded Japan twice, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, third time they came to bomb in Japan. And the third time they came to bomb in Japan, they bombarded not atomic bombs, they bombarded leaflets. So there is a major debate within diplomacy studies and disarmament studies. What happened that America did not have the third bomb? No, this is a post-Cold War. We have entered a post-Cold War framework. We cannot anymore directly intervene. So we can only create persuasion, mobilize. We want people to go and press. Let Hirohito surrender. You understand? So within the Japanese top council, 6 members board and discussing about whether Hirohito will surrender or not. Hirohito did not surrender. But how Japan was completely ravished with the war itself, and this is where America rebuilt Japan and assured that I will give you military support. So that is what in Japan you see. Japan has not invested in any defense expenditure, and that is how Japan expanded. So in fact, what you see in Japan. But that created a major psyche in Russia, in America itself. On the one hand, it bombarded leaflets. There is also, you find, the psychological warfare, persuasion, psychological warfare. Henceforward, all your communications are all psychological warfare. It is no more a direct, it is all through psychology, it's all weapons. And this is where you find America constantly invested in whole Latin America, or even in other parts where we have seen that all about brainwashing and psychological warfare. So what I was saying in my lecture, that military psychology was one major area where a lot of students were interested in my time to study that. Why is it that it is an important field of industrial war? It's a big industrial investment which went on into it. Now, this warfare, what you see in America, it's about psychological warfare. So you've been trained how to persuade, how to motivate. And these concepts subsequently being appropriated in communication studies. So you find that communication is all about motivation, persuasion, and this is where all came up to, and how do you measure persuasion, and how do you measure motivations. These are all psychological categories which can be measured, countered, and that is how we find this whole world of empiricism is came. That was a major strand which you find in the West and in American context. You find that it was legitimized, but today you find that there are few takers in the global context, but places like India and others still do not know actually the larger historical debate of these concepts. Still you find that there are institutions where